Hi, everyone.
Greetings. We're in Revelation chapter 4, covering how the finished mystery traversed this material back in 1917. And we're on page 77 in the finished mystery. Today we're discussing specifically chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, but again we'll fill in the rest of the chapter so you know the flow. After this I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." At once I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments, with golden crowns on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning, and rumblings, and peals of thunder. And before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass like crystal. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. So what are they going to do with this? Well, as we saw last time, they turned the 24 thrones and the person sitting on them into Old Testament saints, or at least they're symbolized by Old Testament saints. We did a pretty thorough discourse on that last time. We don't have to deal with the paragraphs here. It's interesting that they're quoting themselves all the time. They're quoting 3 times here in the paragraphs where they try to unpack all of this. They're quoting from the 1916 Watchtowerr.
Yeah.
And then you realize, well, that's because they're applying all of it to themselves at that time, and all of this noise and all of these lightnings are about the confusion and tumult that's in the world, World War I.
And them discerning it.
And
That's
they knowing what it
lightning.
all means. That's the lightning
Yeah.
flashes. So they haven't changed in that aspect. They still think
Yeah.
all of the light they've received in the 20th century is lightning flashes from above, right?
So you see, again, their emphasis on last days. That's what they are always thinking, and that's the way they still talk this way. Look at the last paragraph in that section on verse 5. It said, which will, all this shaking and lightning stuff, which will eventuate in the complete overthrow of all existing institutions, systems, and governments. Present events indeed speak in trumpet tones.
So the trumpeting they're doing at this point is that what's happened, World War I, is actually Armageddon. It's begun, and it's going to end in the complete overthrow of all Christendom and all the nations soon. And we've already made a video, and there's several more to come, on the date they give. This is all to happen between 1918 and 1920.
Yeah.
So I'll put that link into one of those at the end. But I also wanted to draw attention to the certainty with which they address the presence of Armageddon at this point, because after all, they had taught for 40 years before 1914 that 1914 was not the beginning of the end, it was the end. So now they're in, they think, the last throes. It's all being overthrown. So it makes sense that they would think, well, whenever this war ends, if it ends, it's going to be climaxed in Armageddon and the New World.
It's the end of the system.
I remember when I was an elder, we used to affectionately, not mock, but laugh at one of the oldest one of our elders at that point was in his early 70s. And the phrase he used continually from the platform was, "We're in the final end."
Yeah.
The same kind of terminology they have here back in 1917.
And he was an older brother, so I guess, it had to be coming soon. So I think that's how he must have adopted this phrase over and over again, the final end.
I know when you joined our congregation and met Peter, he's a very nice man, and invited us over. He and his wife used to invite all the pioneers over for a meal every week,
Every week, and there was a lot of pioneers there.
And that was wonderful. But Peter's, like I said, was already in his 70s, and that would be 40 plus years ago now, so he's long gone, and his wife is long gone. Disappointed, as this generation was, with the fact that it didn't all happen as Russell had indicated it would, as the finished mystery had indicated it would. At the end of it, though, I can't help but see their application of this idea. There were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. What does that all mean? And they have 2 words: perfect knowledge.
Which they have.
They think that at this point they've got full light on all of this. That's why the book is entitled The Finished Mystery.
Yeah.
And of course, the one I read in 1969, just after I was baptized, it was a newly published book. Then is finished, The Mystery of God. We now have full light.
Yeah. They always think they're at the end, and they always think they have all the light.
Yeah, and on the next page, that's page 78, we've got their explanation of what the 4 beasts are. They quote the Diaglott, which of course was a Christadelphian publication, Benjamin Wilson, that these are living ones, these creatures, living ones. But what did they deduce from that?
That they are the attributes of God, I guess. And they still do that, because we've just been going through the Ezekiel Pure Worship one, and that was what they did. They talked about the attributes: justice, power, love, and wisdom. It's fine to talk about the attributes of God, but where do you find it in this text?
Living creatures. Just like we saw 24 elders on thrones, we now have 4 living creatures, which are beyond description almost. But where do you arbitrarily come up with this from?
Yeah.
Well, it's scrambling. It's hermeneutical scrambling for sure. You might, I think you wittily put it, scrambled eggs at one point.
Yeah.
Like Humpty Dumpty fell off the throne.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they have full of eyes before and behind. Well, what does that mean? I like what they actually say about this. Seeing clearly everything that will ever occur in the future and everything that has ever transpired in the past.
But do they believe it?
Today they don't believe that. I don't know if the authors of this book at the time believed this, but Rutherford certainly didn't, and Russell certainly didn't, and the Watchtowerr today does not, but flatly denies the omnipresence and omniscience of God. He knows selectively.
He chooses. And he must choose very well in order to know the right things. It's making God small.
Well, even if they did believe at the time that God was omniscient, some of them did anyway, this book absolutely proves that this God that's omniscient is not in touch with you, because everything it says in this book, virtually everything it says about the future, has been disproven by time.
Yeah.
And it was disproven within 5 to 8 years of this book's publication in 1917.
Yeah.
What's our link?
We're linking actually to a previous video from our coverage of the book. Babylon destroyed in the spring of 1918. Survivors shall come to the works of Pastor Russell for light. So this is what they believed about this book and Pastor Russell's work, that people needed it for light.
The only source of light in the darkness of 1918. Little did they realize the war would end and we'd have a period of peace that would last 20 years.
Even the Watchtowerr today would call this dark.
Well, it's old light.
Yeah.
See you next time.